Hello, class. How are you? How have you been? I hope you're keeping safe spaces. Now, before we broke off for this corona thing, we studied the queer theory. Remember, the course that I'm taking you through is post-modern theories of literature, coded as ALI202. Do not allow yourself to forget. The corona is here with us, but learning must also continue. Now, amongst other things that we discussed under queer theory, we said that it particularly questions the relationship between men and women. It questions sexuality, the overlapping fields of such categories of relationships, such as the so-called LGBTI, that is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex relationships. Like in other disciplines, literary gurus have taken note of the changes inherent in our society. And we said that sexual identity of the cognitive paradigms generated by normative, that is what is considered normal, may be what we want to go by. But the happenings amidst us are telling us, no. Look beyond the normal. There are others that are not normal. Like now we are confronted with the corona, and we have to relate in a certain manner that is near normal, but not normal as we had anticipated. So in our study of Sokwizo-Warner's The Madams, for instance, we realized that we have women who relate and are proud of their relationship. They relate as lesbians, and these are house girls. When they get their offs and they go out and meet, they explain and explore the kind of relationships they have. Now, in the current times, we use a post-modernist theory that we entitle queer theory to analyze that kind of a relationship. And then when we moved on again to Sokwizo-Warner's Men of the South, we also realized that indeed there were characters in this particular book whose relationship would look like they were queer, would look like they were abnormal. They were outside the realms of what is normal. For instance, Mzilikazi's queer sexual relationship arouses the reader's curiosity. And we realize that homosexuality and xenophobia, are inherent in South Africa. And they are aspects of human relationship that can be discussed in literary circles. That is what we studied last time. Now, today, we want to look at three other theories. We want to look at part CJ and the metafictional. We also want to look at the intertextuality. And we also want to look at what we call ontological pluralism as postmodernist theories. We will begin by looking at part CJ and the metafictional. Part CJ is spelled P-A-T-S-I-C-H-E, and the metafictional. Meta is spelled M-E-T-A, and then F-I-C-T-I-O-N-A-L. Part CJ and metafictional. Let us attempt a definition of part CJ so that we would understand what it entails as a theory that we can use in analyzing a text. Now, part CJ can be defined as an artistic work in style that imitates that work of another. Yeah? It imitates that work of another. A good example we would give is Okia Omtata's Luanda Magere. Okia Omtata has given us as literary scholars Luanda Magere as a play that we watch on stage, and we conclude that this is a tragic play. However, it has its roots in the Luo community's legends, because Luanda Magere is a legend in the Luo community's folktales. So we are seeing that this artistic work is a style that imitates another work, and that other work that it imitates is the Luo legend. We may again say that it is metaphysical, it is more than real, because as I've told you in the past, that when you get to fourth year, we will visit some of these ancient sites that belong to us as a people, as Africans. Amongst the areas slated to be visited is the shrine of Luanda Magere, because the clan from where Luanda Magere came, that is the Sidu clan of the Kano people, say that they did not bury Luanda Magere when he died. They left him to stay there so that people would continuously use that shrine, yeah, to sing about his heroic deeds. That it is said that if you sharpen your panga or you sharpen your knife when you're going hunting, you're sure to get a kill. So when you go to that shrine today, like we hope to take you when you get to fourth year, you will see the blade, the shoulder blade of Luanda Magere that turned into a rock, like the story and like the play say. So it is more than real, it is metaphysical. Now, I also said that we will discuss intertextuality. We realize that indeed that is contained, it is intertext. So when we get to intertextuality, we will also draw along this story to be able to get what we mean by patsige, or what we mean by intertextuality as a tenet of the postmodernist theory. Patsige may be paradoxical. It may present a paradoxical situation, suggesting that the plot is coming to a resolution, when in actual fact, it is becoming redundant. But the literary artist tells us that it is not redundant as you think. It is useful. We have converted it into another use. Like if we look at tourism in Kenya, that shrine of Luanda Magere has become a site for tourists to visit. When we visit it, when you get to fourth year, we will be visiting a tourist site. We will pay to be able to see the remains of Luanda Magere, and we will connect that Luo legend to Okia Omtata's play, yeah, Luanda Magere. So that is what we mean to say that when we really think a conclusion is coming, a story is just beginning out of that conclusion. Now, we also want to say that as readers, open your eyes wide. See what your society has to offer and endeavor to find out, does it have a root somewhere? Like when we look at Ngugi wa Thiong'o's Trahology, when we look at the 3 books that he offers to us in a row, when we look at A Grain of Wheat, we look at Weep Not Child, we look at The River Between. Embedded in the novels is the Agikuyu myth, the myth of creation, and the 9 daughters of Mumbi. So this patsige and the metafictional is an aspect of a postmodernist theory that we can use to analyze several texts because we are using what is in the text and focusing our attention to the roots of where that particular event in the story came from. Yeah, but what is the source of that story? It may be important to pay special attention to Luanda Magere as a play. Read it. It's a very short play that you can finish at a sitting. If you didn't read it when we were studying drama in East Africa in first year, read it. It's a useful book that would help you explore Patsije as an aspect of a story. I'll then take you through the next tenet of the postmodernist theory, and this is intertextuality. Now, at the backs of your mind, I want you to have this objective, that at the end of our study of Patsije and the metaphysical, or at the end of our study of intertextuality, or at the end of our study of ontological pluralism, you should be able to use that particular theory or aspect of a theory to analyze a given text. Remember that and keep it open as we read on. Now, intertextuality neighbors quite a lot with Patsije. It is a term developed by the post-structuralist theorists to describe the process by which texts can be seen to have traces of other texts embedded within them. The French theorist Roland Bates proposes the view that all literary texts quote from or refer to other written texts, and that it is ultimately language itself that produces textuality. We can give an example of No Violet Bulawayo's We Need New Names, particularly in her choice to have Darling as a child narrator in that particular story. Now, Darling as a child narrator has a deep-seated desire in her heart. She desires to go to the US and take a break from Zimbabwe. Remember at the time that No Violet Bulawayo was writing this story, We Need New Names, the then president of Zimbabwe was, who can remember? Who can give us that title in the audience? Mugabe. Very good. Now, Mugabe was the then president, but he had overgrown his stay as a president, and the Zimbabweans were complaining that they were suffering and that his leadership was cruel. Now, Darling narrates all these things that I'm telling you about, but we realize that No Violet gives her characters very strange names, and she has an affinity for child characters. For instance, she gives one of the characters the name Bastard, to mean a child born out of wedlock. She gives another the name Chipo, and yet another child is given the name God Knows. We also have another called Forgiveness. All these children have names that are symbolic. There is something the names stand for. And amidst us today, we realize that the writer is borrowing heavily from first-hand experiences amongst us, like the experience of the child narrator, Chipo. Chipo tells us that at the age of 11, her grandfather made her pregnant. She shares the experience with her fellow children, to our astonishment as readers, and we correlate the story that Chipo is telling to experiences that we witness in the society every so often. It is intertext. The different experiences these children have are intertext in the story. Like the story of Darling's father, who goes job hunting in South Africa from Zimbabwe. And when he comes back a very sick man. Yeah. And Darling tells us that he's suffering from this sickness that does not have a name. We know all the symptoms he presents with depict AIDS. He has, been infected by this dreaded virus. And that's something that is real. It happens amidst us. Now, No Violet Bulawayo's use of these strange names depict what we call neologism. Neo. It's like giving us new names for phenomena inherent in the society, so that these things are called by what they represent. Now, the use of neologism allows forms of language by altering the original grammatical syntax. Like the boy called God knows, presents with very strange phenomena until you want to say, hey, God knows, probably the background of this child. Yeah. The text is interestingly readable because the language used signifies a relationship to what we can identify with as readers. The narrator and the reader seem to role play. And it's like we want to finish some of the stories that No Violet Bulawayo is telling us. Now, while post-structuralist theories regard intertextuality as a dominant feature of all texts, the concept has been adopted by other critics to describe the theory we have just discussed. That is Part CJ. It is a form of intertextuality in the postmodernist thought. The sense here is that originality has been exhausted and that all new writing is aping the old. Like we've talked of Kia Mtata's Luanda Magere. We can talk of Ola Rotimi's The Gods Are Not to Blame. Ola Rotimi actually imitates Oedipus Rex. Everything else in that story is the same. The plot, the tragic end and the likes, except the names of the characters and the settings are different. Oedipus Rex is set in Greece, whereas Ola Rotimi's The Gods Are Not to Blame is set in West Africa. But the plot, the choice of characters, the end, all pay a lot of attention to each other in similarity. The Gods Are Not to Blame is an adaptation of Sophocles' Oedipus Rex. Ngugi's trilogy, as I'd said, has itself a series of folktales, the Agikuyu Mumbi story and the likes. The proverb of the oil of the homestead cannot be used on the skins of strangers is a proverb embedded in the Agikuyu traditions. And then when we come to Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, we realize that that blurb that appears at the onset of that book is an adaptation of T.S. Eliot's The Center Cannot Hold, Mere Anarchy is Loosened. Now, the likes of Chinua Achebe were taught by T.S. Eliot, so naturally they copy their teachers. So he has quoted a poem done by T.S. Eliot that has those lines. Now, when we get back to East Africa and we look at David Rubadiri's Stanley Meets Mutesa, we realize that it is an imitation of the journey of the Magi, again written by T.S. Eliot. A lot of borrowing, a lot of intertexting. And again, when we talk of intertexting, The River and the Source gives us a very good example. In The River and the Source, Margaret Ogola's intertext what is indigenously inherent in the traditional Luo community. Like she talks of Ramogi, she talks of the dirge that Akoko sings when the husband dies. And that particular dirge has a lot of similarity to what happens in the Luo community. So that particular idea is intertext in that story. We will take a break for 10 minutes. And when we get back, we're going to look at ontological pluralism. Stay there.